Was this woman that was like, oh, I'm from Maryland. I'm like, what part? She's like, you'd never know. And she said Hampstead. I'm like, I lived in Hampstead. And so there's a congregation for me, we're in the line for the ladies' bathroom. And so I said, well, one time I was making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a feather fell right on my sandwich. And I knew that the Lord was telling me that something great was going to happen for a person that I was going to be involved with that coming weekend. So it was a prophetic sign that he would be providing the answer. And in fact, I was able to share the story that this person, I was in the presence, a feather fell, and then I was able to say, oh yeah, God's going to do a great healing. There was a suicide attempt, and then this person was apprehended, restored, and stopped all drug addiction. And she's like, all that from a feather? And so there was, this like peace in me to share this testimony without being offended that they didn't get it. But I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, I saw a feather today. And I'm like, out of the clear blue sky? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, then don't you think it's interesting that I'm meeting you in the ladies' line? Nice to know you. Hey, we're from Maryland, get it. So I want to bless you with the fact that look for the feathers. Because if that's why you're here, if you came to be a part of this sovereign move of God, and then you meet me who is like, wow, I have to really kind of fit in with this sovereign move of God because I'm used to seeing this extraordinary stuff, then take it for what it's worth, girlfriend. I impart the same expectation to you. So I'm very grateful for my experience of going to the Asbury meeting because I think it is the hope of what so many of us long for. And revival is kind of discerned or equated to the stream in which we operate from. So this is different from what I'm used to. Like my mentors came from the Toronto outpouring. And with that, you had a lot of emotionalism, which a lot of Christians get hung up on because I guess they think emotions are bad. But you also had the Jesus movement that pretty much commenced in 1973. So if you look at a calendar, that means that we are in the year of Jubilee. And that 50-year mark is appropriate for God showing up and breaking out in these college campuses like Asbury. So I think from the outside looking in, the world would say it's very measurable. It's very explainable. It's a bunch of people coming from a different territory of land and congregating together and basically having a Christian concert. So some of the people that I interviewed and was meeting up with, that's what they described. They're like, oh yeah, it's a Christian concert. And I'm like, that's great, but let's see some miracles, signs and wonders, right? And they're like, oh. And I'm not really understanding that except for my experiences up north, in going through retreats and whatnot that were very quantifiable. It's like from 150 to 250 we're doing this. And my question has always been, for anybody that knows me, I'm sorry, what about Holy Spirit, like if it wants to show up and shake the ground? And they were always offended, and I went to this gathering with the idea of, Lord, if it's solemn and if it's reverent, then I'm going to partake, because it is really nice to be a part of something. And everybody was absolutely friendly. Okay, so sleeping in my car and just heading to Asbury as a road trip felt like a compulsion, like I had to be there. And it wasn't because I expected some radical move. I knew the stream that Asbury College functions in, Wesleyan background, you're going to have sensationism. There's not a lot of Pentecostal charismatic expectation because, those veins of worship or belief don't know what that is. So when you have a bunch of people that are coming and they have that reverency, that's also spoken from the pulpit. It's like the expectancy. We like order. We appreciate that you're being gentle and respectful of the people. And those are words that are kind of buzzwords for the type of beliefs that certain denominations abhor or they believe in. And so knowing that, it was still like, I don't care, let's just go see what happens. And I love the testimony of this one kid. He stood up and he said he experienced a trauma years before, so that's my buzzword, and he just couldn't cry. Like his emotions were just on the down low, apathetic. And the majority of young people that were showing up were expressing struggles with pornography, with apathy, with depression, anxiety. And I knew that the Lord called me to go for that so that I could also glean how are they expressing it, how are they able to share it. So he was saying, shutdown mode. I could not even shed a tear. And he got in the car on the way to the Asbury University gathering and just starts weeping. And the Holy Spirit just met him in his car, and he was just overwhelmed with waves and waves of just the shedding of these tears, cleansing, if you will. And it was just fantastic to see this young 20-something share how he just was so grateful that he could be crying for the first time in his life in a long time. And then he gets pulled over and he can't even speak to the cop, and the cop's like, whoa, dude, I only was getting you for a taillight. And he's like, I'm sorry, I just can't stop crying because God's moving on me. And God's like, here's a warning, and let him go. And that is the focus where God was erupting me, because there's so much misunderstanding with emotion in Christianity. It's just, put a lid on it and then lay your porn at the altar and then walk away. It's not that simple. Shame and guilt are real emotions that anchor us to the moment when we got arrested in our development to pursue the Lord. So however old we were when we found this outlet, this fantasy to escape from pain and suffering, that's where we have to track back so that we can unbuild that wall that we built up brick by brick. And we can say, look, I need help here. I don't know how to appropriate walking in right living to follow after the Lord with hunger, because I'm still tripped up and stuck in the past. And for me, I was just asking people, just going around like, what are you feeling? And that was the goal. It was like they wanted to feel something different. They wanted to feel something that told them they were still alive, because life had apprehended their expression.